Ladies and gentlemen, Namaskar. Welcome to the 15th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol Banega Swasth India at Han Machalski Foundation, Bethak. We are delighted to introduce Mahanadi, the tale of a river. This session is presented by Dainik Bhaskar. Rivers have always been central to civilization. Award-winning Bangla author Anita Agnihotri's acclaimed work, Mahanadi, The Tale of a River, recently published in English translation, chronicles the stories of people who live by the banks of the mighty river that flows into the Bay of Bengal. An amalgamation of dynamic myths, legends, and archaeological anecdotes. Mahanadi is a story about people connected across time and space through a vast body of flowing water. Agnihotri, who has been a dedicated civil servant, writes compassionately about the lives of the marginalized and takes the reader for a deep dive into the realities of the Indian landscape. She speaks with Arunava Sinha, celebrated translator and academic, about her body of work and Mahanadi in particular, as they discuss the treasury of Bangla literature the subcontinent has to offer. Let's have a round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's my great pleasure and privilege today to be in conversation with Anita Agnihotri, who is a writer whose works I've personally, as a reader, admired greatly and also been fortunate enough to have had the chance to translate. Our session today is titled Mahanadi, which is the name of her most recently translated novel into English. Mahanadi, of course, is not just a Mahanadi, but also literally the Mahanadi River. And it, in fact, is not just a novel, but I think in many senses a wonderful metaphor for Anita's writing. Anita is also, interestingly, among the writers in Bangla whose works have been translated the most in terms of number of books into English. As many as 10 of her works have been translated into English over the years, which means that she's found a readership outside of those who read only in Bangla. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start by talking about Mahanadi, which is very remarkable as a novel in the sense that it is nothing like you would expect a normal novel to be. It is not about the lives of one set of people. It is not about a dramatic arc. It is not about conflicts between a fixed set of individuals. But you're following the course of a giant river. Now, how does this work for you as fiction?
I will, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Arunava. I will tell you a little about how writing of the novel came about. I was working in Odisha at that point of time and traveling extensively in the rural areas. And Mahanadi is a river. I was familiar with the river since many years. And I would say the dream of writing a narrative on Mahanadi, I carried within myself for over a decade. But the river is not only huge, in terms of the volume of water it carries, it is also very diverse in the sense that it comes from Chhattisgarh, then it crosses into Odisha, where our first large dam after independence, Hirakud Dam, has been constructed. Then it goes through hills and gorges and Shatkoshia, where it flows through a narrow gorge. Then it comes to the plain and finally meets the Bay of Bengal near Jagatsinghpur, which is also Paradip. So I would always think that how do I capture this? It is a river, all right, but it also carries with it so many memories and visions of civilization over time, because people have come, settled down next to the river, people have come and gone away, houses have been submerged, people have left. So when I thought of writing, I was gripped with such a sense of trepidation that I found it is going to be difficult for me. But I started gradually, and then I realized that it has to have a different format as a novel. Like a novel, it doesn't have, characters who keep on surfacing through the novel and they're connected. It is not about one place either. As the river has moved, it is almost like a moving circle. People have changed, landscape has changed, situation has changed, even the myths and folklores around the river, the archaeological sites, everything has changed. But there is a story. There is a story, and I was initially a little hesitant, thinking that how would my readers in Bengali take it? Because this format of the novel is not common at all. But I was surprised that people really, enjoyed reading the novel, and they almost felt they are also traveling along with the flow of water. And of course, after that, when it was translated to English, I'm sure people who read it in English also would like it. It's an experiment, you can say, in the form and structure of a novel, but it has so much of myself, in which I have also written in the introduction to the book. It's almost I got identified with the people who, are dependent on the river, people who trust the water, people who spend their lives, and even people who had to be cut off from the proximity to the river and went away farther in the jungles because after the dam came, they could not find any land nearby where they could settle down. So it is a lot of sorrows, which has kind of got flown into the novel, but it also has a lot of joy about living, happiness about living, and the way we think of life, maybe people, who are the elite middle class in the cities, and the way a person in the village looks at life, it is totally different. A weaver, for example, who is settled on the bank of Shonpur, where the Mahanadi flows, they're such wonderful, creative, and absolutely modest human beings. He thinks that this river water is the best for dyeing of his yarn. He thinks of a design that he puts. And all the designs, if you look at Odisha Ikat, the fish, the elephants, the trees, everything gets woven into a sari. I mean, you see how beautiful it is. It is a form of art which is kind of deriving from the river and its surroundings. So all this has come. It is spoken about the semi-nomadic artists who are working settled on the fringe of the village for years, but the village never welcomes them inside. And one day, I have been visiting the areas over and over again because, it is not for seeing a place. I derive the spirit of joy in my writing from the warmth of human company. So when I again have gone back to the same village, I found those people have left. They are no more there. I felt good that at least their story remains in the story of Mahanadi. So it's a long thing. It's a very large, it has so much of myself, and it's taken me 4 years to write the novel. And obviously after it has been done into English, people will be reading it in English, and it has been translated into Odia, which will be shortly published by the Odia Sahitya Academy, because the river is so much in Odisha. After Chhattisgarh, it enters Odisha in the Bargarh district. So I thought it's also my tribute to the people of Odisha who has been with me for, I would say, over 2 decades of my personal and working life. So this is how it is done, and Nivedita Sen, who has translated Mahanadi, has done a beautiful job. She has kept herself very close to the original. She has been painstakingly trying to get the meaning of the local words, because Mahanadi is not only Bengali, it has lot of words in rural Odia words, colloquial Odia words. So she has been very, very faithful, discussing with me, trying to put the same meaning, and she has put a very nice translator's note in the beginning of the book, which acquaints the reader in, I would say, 10-15 pages with the spirit of the book, I would say. So it has been, and she spent 1 full year translating I'm very grateful to her for this. And I think the overall effect has been, you also must have read the translation. Yes. It has what I wanted to say in the book has also come out in the translation. That is very important.
Yes. So now, and I know you are probably a little tired of being described as a bureaucrat or now a former bureaucrat who is a writer, but in a sense, it has allowed you to have first-hand experiences that perhaps very few other writers anywhere in the world, certainly in India, can have on a daily basis. But there is also the temptation then to write a work of ethnography because you have real-life stories. How do you go from there to fiction, and what do you think the elements of fiction are in your novels? Because most of them, and let's take Mahanadi as an example, and you also have a sequel now to Mahanadi, which is called Mahakantar. So please talk to us about that as well. But so what are the elements of fiction that come from you, from your imagination, as you said, you put yourself in there?
You know, this was a problem for me, I would say, till about 4 or 5 years back, but now I realize I have to kind of stay with this, a former civil servant. I have been writing fiction and poetry since I was very small. So by the time I joined the Indian Administrative Service, I was already a writer. But, you know, what I realized it is, people often think that, well, because I have been posted there, so I have written about it. It is not like that. In fact, it is the other way around. I was very, very scared of becoming a teacher, an academic. I felt that if my students ask questions in the class and I can't answer them, I will have to run away. So, out of sheer fear, I joined the Indian Administrative Service, where luckily mostly you get is captive audience, because your junior colleagues cannot run away if you are speaking. Anyway, that apart. But you know what happens is, I must admit that I have done my job with a whole lot of sincerity and honesty. But I was never a true civil servant in the sense that I never saw things from the perspective of, let us say, the administration or government. I mean, it may sound very contradictory, nobody would believe it. That is why I had to go on my own. Like, there are places where I've gone, nobody knows me. I might have seen in passing Mahanadi in Sambalpur or Shonpur. But when I went to the villages, I went on my own. In the same way, when I wrote Mahakantar, the novel, I have traveled from southern Kalahandi through Chhattisgarh to Gadchiroli, purely on my own, establishing connection with, say, village workers, local NGOs, local primary school teachers, local tribal leaders, and there are helpful friends who connect me to them. And this is how, you know, I have tried to separate myself from a point of view which I'm supposed to hold. Because if you really write as a civil servant, you will not see most of the things that are there, because our training is essentially to overlook a lot of things.
Could you unpack that a bit? What do you mean by that?
You know, I mean, I'm saying that if you go to a place, you are supposed to see, you are trained to see the brighter side of the situation. Okay? You are not supposed to see what is hidden and what is beyond the eyes, because nobody likes it. We have a prosperous, we have a $3 trillion, economy. I mean, we have bright shopping malls, we have a huge thing, we have a vast advance in technology. Who wants to listen about, let us say, a person called, from the Shitulia community, who could not enter the village and therefore he went away. But then, I have trained myself over the years, and I have been there for 37 years, to see things which I would not otherwise see, because I am not reporting back to government. So, this is the training, and luckily people trusted me. Luckily people trusted me if I go to the village. Like, I was the first director of rehabilitation in Odisha. I drafted the rehabilitation policy. I would go only up to a point with my team of people. After that, I will go away and go to the villages. There have been places where angry villagers have, surrounded me because they feel that government is responsible for their displacement. I have sat and listened to them. And the bonding is very clear. And a lot of things are happening in the field which are not reported in any newspaper, which are not part of our news or stories. So idea is to bring out the lives, a flow of life which is going on, which is keeping our country on. So this is the thing. So I used to feel very miserable when people say, oh, you're a civil servant writing. Then I today realized that those 37 years of my life also, they are very real. Well, they have put me up to a point. They have sent me somewhere. But they have not told me what to bring back to fiction from there. That is my own journey. And that is how it has been. For example, now I am writing a long novel. I have not started. It will take me another 3 years on the Narmada movement, which has not come into Bengali literature. For that, I have to travel from Amarkantak through Maheshwar to Satpura to Nandurbar to, let us say, where Narmada meets the sea in Bharuch. So that journey, no government has sent me. So this is my own. But after leaving Calcutta, I have been able to identify myself with what I think is my quest for a country which is not seen most of the time. And it is not bad news or it is not a sad news, but they are very much there. The women of Koraput who are doing business with their, let us say, they make full jhadu out of grass which grows on the sands of the river. After demonetization came, their entire business crashed. Those girls are sitting with few lakhs of jhadus which has no market because their wholesaler will not turn up to them and deal with cash. So these changes have happened. They are part of our history and they should be part of our literature too. I do not know ultimately what it means in terms of, let us say, permanence of writing, but I'm really not bothered about that. I am a hands-on writer. What I see, what I believe in, I try to put that in fiction, and that is how I write.
I think as a reader, one of the things I've observed about the way you write about these people and their stories is that you also include the process of discovery. It is not as though it's already out there and some kind of ubiquitous storyteller who knows everything is saying it. But you have characters who come in, who encountered the people there, and there is almost a shock of recognition and understanding. And that, in a sense, I think as a reader made me understand it better.
Probably I am not so aware of the way I write because I do not do any conscious plotting in my short stories. You have translated so many of my short stories, you know. The story starts from some point and then it goes and ends somewhere. It is not within my control. The story has an organic life of its own. Mahanadi, that way, novel is more measured in the sense that I write at much slower pace. So all I know that maybe a certain kind of readers, they like to relate to that. But I don't think there will be, it is not popular writing or it is not writing that is entertaining in a broad sense. So I do not think that there will be hundreds and thousands of people reading my book. But maybe there are people who are interested in knowing things which have gone undiscovered, would still like to read.
But I think you really have a very large readership, so perhaps you're underestimating your own reach among readers. Let's go back now to the very first book of yours that was translated into English, Forest Interludes. It was a collection of non-fiction and fictional pieces.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us about that book?
Yes, that was a very unusual book, and I'm very most indebted to Kalpana Bardhan, who, at that point of time, it is about 24 years back, who was was left her teaching of economics at Berkeley, and she had translated Manik Bandyopadhyay and Advaita Mallo Burman, and she met me in Calcutta. She was not familiar with my writing, and it is a remarkable thing that she read through hundreds of my, I would say, stories, essays, poems, everything. And then she decided that, not typically translating a particular book, she would select and then she will introduce me. And the selection is entirely hers. I did not interfere with her choice at all. Some journals or essays of my field diaries. She also included 5 short stories and my first novel, Mahul Diha Days. And she wrote a beautiful introduction. I was quite young then. And the book was published in Delhi. And I don't think the book was a great success in that sense because it was a solid book of mixed genre, so which was a surprise for many readers. But the book stayed on. I mean, it is available even now. And the book got translated into Swedish later. I think after 5-6 years, it got translated into Swedish. And a young, very, very dedicated, idealistic Norwegian poet Zoe Tyberg, he translated that from English to Swedish. That is a great compliment, the book. So books are not often translated this way because books have targeted audience, and books cannot obviously have story, essay, and novel together. But I believe the publisher also had some hesitation at that point of time, but Kalpanadi did not budge. She said, no, it has to be done like this. And 24 years after that, she again wrote another introduction to Moholdiha Days. She felt that this novel needs to be published once again. And even though the Bengali Moholdiha Days remain paperback, that English Moholdiha Days is a hardbound novel with a very nice introduction. It's a story again of northern Odisha, where it's a story of an area where, again, people are watching the way development takes place and the way they communicate with the state. And the observer, again, is a young civil servant, but the story is not about the civil servant. Its story is about, the internal conflicts of a person who does not know where she is, whether she is with the people, because people are not able to trust her fully, or she is with the, with the government, because even government's faith she doesn't have in full. And what happens in this process? This is a very, this is not a, authentic theoretical format. But it is a story from the field again. It has been written in a way which is again most organic. And those days, when it was published in 1995 as a book, the Bengali readers, of course, loved it. But the publishers got a bit scared. They thought there are too many radical things in the book, which I could not make out what it is. So, but the book has somehow stayed on it's still available. This is good. So that is how Kalpanadi included all these, and she brought out the book.
Moholdiha, of course, I think was one of the earliest ways in which many Bengali readers discovered your work.
Probably. I wrote short stories only before that.
Yes.
That was my first novel. And I was also quite hesitant because I always feel I'm very underconfident as a writer. I don't know how a book will be taken. But it is very involved writing. If I read Moholdiha Days, I am surprised. It's so emotional. It is so ornate in places. I have described River Brahmani page after page. And the novel was written in England. And I had a 3-month deadline to submit it. I used to write it and cry. I used to wipe my own tears and keep writing the book. So that is also very interesting. That is how, I don't think books are written like that anymore.
Yes, I wonder if books are written like that, in that way anymore. So the next book that came out in English translation was titled in English, Those Who Had Known Love. Do you want to talk to us about it?
Yeah, it's again it's a very different book. I have not written many books like this. It's a Bengali romantic novel called Jara Bhalobeshe Chilo. And Rani Rai, a very remarkable teacher of English and a translator, who is no more with us, but she had a great influence on all of my friends present here. Radha is here and Devjani is here. That she motivated us to believe in our writing and in our work. And I still remember one thing she told me when I used to be pressurized with work and don't know what to do, how to handle government and family and writing. She used to say, bother only about your intellectual space. Everything else in life will be taken care of. What a powerful thing to say. So Rani Dey had come in a cab all the way to my house to ask for the book. What humility. You can't think of this. She translated this book, and there was a publisher in Delhi who probably is not active anymore, and the book sold really well. And it has references to the National Academy of Administration, where the young protagonist of the book was trained. So people thought it was a book about the academy. So academy bookstore started displaying, and the National Academy Library had the book. It is a romantic story. But again, in Bengali we have a saying called Gorur Rachana. You bring that, whatever you are told to write, you ultimately bring about that story of the cow. The cow has 4 legs and 2 horns and 1.
But the reason is different. That's because the students have only prepared an essay on the cow.
But not that. But somehow, even the young protagonist who goes back to a village to work, a local small block area, same problem. She wants to find out. She has a quest of the country. So this country, whatever I think of it, my India, it keeps on coming back to all my writing. But even then, it was a dominantly romantic novel, very, very romantic stories of Mussoorie and Shimla and beautiful landscape. So people really loved it. And the book was in the Bengali bestseller list of Anandabazar for months, which had never happened to me later. Maybe people found out that I don't write that kind of stuff.
So what was your inspiration for that book? Or are you not going to tell us any real
No,
life
no, no, no.
stories?
It is nothing that. Basically, my publisher said, give us a book which is, which will really do well in the market. Because people look at me and they get scared that what kind of thing I'll bring out. After Mahanadi, I have brought out Mahakantar. All stuff which my mom used to say that it's easier to read Russian than read your Bengali. So I wrote it thinking that, okay, they will like it, but the book became an instant hit. Ranidhi translated it. English, it did very, very good business, as I'm told. So all this happened.
So it was actually published by Srishti Publishers, who publish romances and who have actually given us many best-selling writers
okay.
of romances in recent times. So they published them first and then the bigger publishers took them away.
No, last I tried to buy a copy of the book. It was priced at 2,300. So I left it at that.
I know, yes. But we must tell Srishti to reissue it. Then you wrote, or rather then we had a translation of called The Awakening, which is set partly in the Kumartuli area of Kolkata and in the Naxalbari days. So do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
This is a novel called Akal Bodhan, which according to both my Bengali and English publishers is a very strong story. It is story of a Mrit Shilpi or image maker who is not from the normal Pal community, but he belonged to the scheduled caste community. He's a Dalit in a sense. So he had usual barriers in entry into the image making market, but she broke the barriers because of his unusual talent and ultimately struggled with poverty, but he established himself. And parallelly here runs the story of a young girl who is looking for a father who was killed either in police operation or was abducted and killed, those because 70s there are a lot of killings and counter killings in Calcutta, and it is her trying to trace her father, and at one point of time everything merges together. The story, the publisher Zuban liked the story, and Nandini, who is now friend, Nandini Goho, she translated it beautifully, and this book also did fairly well. So this is about the book. I think we have 3 more minutes for discussion.
No, 13.
13, but we have some question.
No, we have plenty of time. We have 13 minutes and then questions.
Okay, good.
I know you're dying to finish it off.
No. I'm enjoying it. I'm getting to talk to you after such a long time.
I know. I know when you were talking earlier, I was reminded of that incident when Satyajit Ray narrated the script of Pather Panchali to Bidhan Chandra Ray, who was the first Chief Minister of West Bengal. And when he came to the end and told him about how the family was leaving Nishchindipur to go away to Benares, and Bidhan Ray was very angry and said, no, how can they leave the village? There are so many community development schemes there now. So change the ending and make him buy a tractor along with other villagers and let the audience leave the hall happy. So I was reminded of that when you mentioned how as bureaucrats you are trained to see only what's good.
Yes.
Right. So now throughout all this you were writing short stories, of course. And there perhaps you have one of the widest canvases because each story can focus on a smaller aspect of things. And you've had 3 collections of short stories published in translation in English, 17, Sabotage, and The Life of Mongol Taram.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Which again Ranidhi had translated.
Which Ranidhi that was, I think, her last
book of stories.
translation.
She also had another book which is Ritik Ghatak's scripts.
Yes, along
but
with that.
stories it was the last.
Right. So will you tell us about some of the concerns and preoccupations? Because your stories here partly reflect your concerns in your novels, but many of them are also intensely urban stories.
They are both urban, rural, but my stories are very special to me. I mean, I never know how a story will be written. I start with something, it goes somewhere, and maybe a very small visual leads to a story. I'm not, as I told you, I don't plot my stories, but somehow I have been writing. I wrote over 200 stories by now, which is nothing by the standard of my contemporaries. They must have written 500, 600 stories by now. But I don't write a lot. I may be writing 5-6 stories in a year, not more than
200 stories alone in the lifetime of a writer is a huge output.
Provided
by
the
any
right stories are
standards.
good. But anyway, you have to tell me why you thought of translating them. I can ask you a counter question. Because you have translated the largest number of stories and the translations have come out very well. So I would say there is something, like even if it's the urban story or it's a story about a rural landscape, like Ongshu Ghat, where absolutely drought prone, sun rays hit village where a group of handful of government servants are not able to escape anywhere and everybody has forgotten them there. So maybe the mind of the author is same, because I think you don't find any difference when you translate a story that is urban or a story that is rural. The writer's mind probably works in the same way. No? So stories are very special to me, but I cannot say a lot about how I write them because there is no conscious crafting. And sometimes stories are written very fast. There are stories I have written in sitting down in 6-7 hours time I have written. There are stories which have taken days to finish because I have not kept any goal in me. I normally do not write on demand of newspaper, and luckily they also keep safe distance from me. I don't have pressure like I have to submit a story in 3 days' time. People have given me ample kind of independence, the editors, especially they don't know what to expect from me. Some bombshell will be dropped on their head sometime. So you remember the
Are they scared of you? Are the Bengali publishers scared of you?
I don't think so. They're quite nice because they know that I'm not going to leave soon. But you remember this story, Sabotage, which you have translated. Sabotage was not published by a leftist little magazine because they said it is against our principle. It was taken up by another leftist magazine who published it. And there are difference between two lefts. You can guess.
This was the more radical left that
Yeah,
published
more
it.
radical left didn't publish it. The less radical left in power published it. So the ultimate story got published and finally translated by you.
Yes, of course. The thing is that I've been very moved by all your stories, because despite the rich historic, ethnographic, geographic detail in all of them, and it's very easy to slip into, for such stories to slip into presenting the bigger picture, as it were, and almost not foregrounding the individuals. But in your stories, it is always the individuals who are the beginning and the middle and the end of the story, and everything else is there. And you can't imagine the story without the everything else, but still it is the individuals who matter. And I was so moved by the story Crater Lake, Ulkarod, where there is just this brother and sister.
Oh, I'm very fond of this story.
Do you want to talk about it?
It is a story about, we have a crater lake somewhere deep in the interior area of Maharashtra. And a brother and sister, they sit next to the lake and they see the lake. The story of the lake is Genesis, how a meteor came and the lake was created way back. But it is not only about the lake because they're remembering their mother, who, not rooted well in the family, used to move around on her own here and there. And she wrote a letter to them from sitting on the banks of the lake. So they recall all that memory. They think of their mother who had I would say, troubled marriage in the sense that she was not well understood by the family where she was married. At the same time, it gets connected to the story of the meteor, the Ulka, which comes thinking it will get shelter on the lap of the earth. But that doesn't happen because the lake is created and you don't find the meteor there. So it's very difficult to describe it, but it's one of the best story I've ever written myself. It's best of my creative, and thank you for mentioning this, best of my creative expressions, I would say.
And the meteor lake also comes back in Kaste, or the sickle.
Kaste, yeah. It is an unforgettable memory. It is a deep down in Buldhana district of Maharashtra, the third largest meteor lake. As typically of in our country, nobody maintains the site. There are a lot of things strewn around it, and local people know about it, but then they're not so aware. We don't keep our beautiful things, we don't preserve them well. But there is such an unearthly beauty in the lake. You have to see to believe. It is a lifetime's experience looking at it. And in the story, that mother who was to move around, she came in a bus and she was trying to catch the sunset, which is beautiful. And when the son and daughter who come after many years, they have come in a car. So they can choose their time. They don't have to rush for the sunset. So that is the difference that has come. But the emotional kind of the powerful attraction sunset had for the mother, do they still have it? I mean, a lot of things are lost with time, and also the way we move up in our own, in the class.
So, the stories we published in the collection called Sabotage were quite intensely political in their backdrop and even in the actions of the characters. But two other stories I remember very deeply and I still think of out of the collection called 17. One is the title, the eponymous story, 17, which I would really like to believe is you and your daughter because the circumstances match. But it's also so much about a mother and a daughter and their relationship. But that sounds like a cliche. It is nothing like a cliche at all. But the other story that really I truly loved was the one where this lady goes abroad to her son and daughter-in-law's house in the US and meets Neil Armstrong.
In England, Neil Armstrong, yes.
Yes.
And they develop a friendship.
They develop a friendship. Almost a romance.
Almost a romance, yes. That story is still liked very much by the Bengali readers. But you know what? One thing is very interesting. The way, I am again always, I mean, I don't want to bring the gender everywhere, but the way a male writer writes and the way I have written, totally different. I mean, for me, work was my priority because I'm paid by the taxpayers' money. After that, my family. I'm very I'm very attached to my family. I mean, for me, my children, my husband, even in-laws, my parents, everybody is. I mean, I've spent so much of time on these relationships, kinships, and so little on writing. Writing had never got my priority time. All my stories, even my novels are written in one go, no correction. Almost as if in a rush. So all these emotions come. For example, the story you mentioned first, the one before that, no, not after the cradle, second. 17, yes. It is obviously about my daughter. When I was about to leave her, and leaving her in a PG accommodation and coming out, the turmoil that was going on in my mind. Is this the end of a relationship, or will it start on a new level? Will I be able to recognize that? So all this comes in a way which is most pure. And lest my son who is here gets jealous, there's a story called Oporimeo, which is about my equation with him, about which my daughter is jealous, which she thinks that I have shown Oporimeo in better light than her, and she says that 17, I am not that silly, you have made me look like a very silly person.
Where are the stories about your relationships with your translators?
I have to write one. But translators have been my great support and friends all through. I mean, I don't think without them I would have been what I am today.
So very briefly now, before we go to questions, the last novel that has just been published in Bangla, and the one before that, the new one is called Lobonakto, and the one before that is Kaste, which has been translated as The Sickle. These are far more political in their focus and their storytelling. What changed for you, or did it just happen?
I think as I'm growing older and seeing more and more of the country, which is not connected to me in terms of my relationship with work, there is a feeling of I would say anguish, anger, and that we could not see the society which we wanted to see since we were born. I mean, they look at the condition of the caste, the sugarcane workers. They live in shanties, and you feel you have arrived in an India which is 200 years old. They don't have drinking water, they don't have electricity. Year after year they come. I mean, this is absolutely it is absolutely not forgivable. I mean, I almost feel that what have we been doing collectively? It's also the story of our failures. And this is how come parched Marathwada, I would say more angry stories, more disillusioned stories are coming up. Mahakantar also, I mean, many Bengalis read that part of the story where there is a journey which has become a red corridor now from Kalahandi through Chhattisgarh to Gadchiroli. But why is it the red corridor? I mean, why did we fail in our communication? Why was tribal land taken away in the name of industry? Why did we in Salwa Judum make one group of tribals fight the other? I mean, why did we do it? we are imposing through our action uh, irreversible damages on the lives of people. Things we cannot compensate or repair. There is a pain. There is a pain, I think, like me, many authors, many writers or artists share. But it is not kind of blaming the government alone. It is a collectivity of failure in understanding, trying to fulfill the dreams of our own people. So that pain always remains. Maybe it is more manifest. Maybe I'm more frank as I'm growing older. Romance is falling off.
Which is the perfect note on which to open this for questions. Yes, two questions over there. First, yes. We can take it in any order.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation, brilliant questions and brilliant answers. But I wanted to ask you, Anita Di, particularly about your poetry, which you did not talk about, and maybe this is just a reader's response. I think you are a brilliant poet, and I would like to hear something about your relationship with your poetry.
You know, I was a poet to begin with, and I thought my life will be spent writing poetry only.
From the age of 5.
Age of 5. And Subhash Mukhopadhyay had predicted in the handwritten postcard that to my father that if a daughter writes, she will be writing quite well. But I started writing prose, and my mother, who strongly believed that writing poetry does not take you anywhere, which all important poets will kill me if I say this, but she believed that. She said, "Tu at a golpo lake, you write a story." And then Bimal Kaur, who liked my first story published in Desh, he said, "You cannot, ride two boats at the same time. You have to either stick to prose or write poetry." But I tried doing both. What happens in Bengali, once you're known as a prose writer, the editors don't approach you for poetry, they ask for more and more prose. So my writing poetry has gone down in that sense, but I still have 7 volumes of poetry and I keep writing every day. That has become a part of my, within myself it has come. And it has become very personal expression, but I'm very happy if I can write a poem, and I normally try to keep it next to my pillow because I feel it's like a treasure. So thank you for asking this question.
Yes. Not much of poetry, but just 7 volumes.
They're thin volumes. Poetry is not like novel.
I think Eliot published 4 volumes at most.
Don't compare me with them because they never counted their books or...
That is true. There, someone had a question here.
Yes, it was me.
Yes.
I have a question that I want to actually be an author, so what tips should I follow for it?
I think maybe that's a conversation you should have in private with the author when you get her book signed by her. Because if she tells you what her tips, everyone will pick them up.
No. Just 2 lines I will tell you. Read lots of books. Be very open about what you are reading. And travel, talk to people, and write down a little every day. Have a diary. That's what my dad did, a great favor to me when I was 5. He bought me a small diary and a pencil. And every time the diary would get over, I used to write down. But these days I think kids don't write in pen and paper, but wherever, whether in your laptop or your iPad, write down a few lines of the day. Try to write something. And soon you will enjoy the process.
Do you do that now? Do you write every day?
No.
Now we have so much more time, and now you're saying you don't write every day.
I have so much writing, Arunava. People have suddenly discovered me all over the country.
So you are writing every day. Okay. Are there more questions?
Yeah,
yes.
one question.
Yes.
Thank you, Anita Di and Arunava. This was absolutely delightful. Anita Di, I love your representation of rural India in stories, novels. But I was also thinking of the essays you've been writing about your days in presidency. And, in those essays, I get a picture of a very elite Bengal, which can also be very parochial, very self-obsessed, kind of focused on a Bengal Renaissance tradition. And when I read those, I realized that, something that is easy to forget reading your fiction, that your intellectual training happened in that universe. And it really strikes me that in spite of being shaped by that universe, you've been able to write about subaltern India in such an amazing way. And I know the president's tradition is not necessarily exclusive. There is obviously the Naxalite tradition came out of there, happened there. But at the same time, I think I've seen this intellectual tradition being so focused on the urban, the metropolitan, and so limited that it's very hard. So I want to know something about your making, your Bildung as it were, that how you came from the tradition and yet connected to, and I know the bureaucratic experience is definitely part of it, but intellectually it seems like a total makeover. And that really strikes me, and it really struck me when I read those presidency essays. So do you want to say a little bit about that?
Sreekat, it's a tragedy really. Calcutta is a city I grew up in, I loved the city, I loved the environment. At one point of time, I realized that I'm being choked. I cannot stay there anymore. So you will see at the end of this stories I'm writing, it is called Likhte Likhte Athoi Dur. My only longing was to leave Calcutta, to emancipate, get liberated. And I have jokingly said that I kind of, in the way a child is born, my knot was cut with the city, and I was born in the lap of the country. So I would not have been where I am today if I stayed in Calcutta. Calcutta is it was intellectual, there are book lovers, there is elite Bengali. Even the Marxists did not have Dalit or minority communities or women in their folds. But I needed to discover myself. And that happened only after I went to Chota Nagpur and I went to the villages and I started talking to people and understanding. The understanding today of the country which I have, whatever limited way, is very genuine. It may not be big like that of a social scientist. My writing may be flawed, but my understanding and my empathy, is absolutely genuine. And that could not have happened if Calcutta had not crushed me like that. It is almost like a octopus or a python. It was kind of crushing me every day. There is no respite. It is become a very, very small place for me. There are so many things I unlearned from my family. The kind of things they imposed on my thinking. And all love and affection, all right. But I would have been constrained for my entire life. My freedom happened because I left. Incidentally, it was civil service. If I have got a job of a college lecturer in Giridih or maybe Dhanbad, I would have taken it. But as I told you, I was too scared to be a teacher.
But they teach your books in colleges now, so.
I don't know. I was waiting for Sreekat to finish thinking that whether I'd be able to answer his question. Even today I have this kind of trepidation.
We have last question.
Yes.
Namaste, ma'am. In your conversation, you mentioned about the broom makers who used to live nearby the rivers and all. And when we look at, especially the younger generation in this time of tagging and trending, there are so many communities, जो आपने mention किया, who doesn't get mentioned. And especially about, these kind of natural resources, whether it's river, mountain, or the desert in Rajasthan, or through the literature, what do you think that we can help these communities and, have some more conversation about this? Of course, you mentioned beautifully about in your book, but how the literature community can get, more knowledge or information about these communities who in general doesn't have, resources to come out and speak about themselves, who are just surviving because of one trend,
You see, it is like this. A writer's job is not to inform or bring about facts. A writer goes and shares, like I am like a bird. I'm going somewhere, I'm bringing a small grass, a little piece of herb probably somewhere back, where my readers are. There are lots of people working with people all over the country. We understand, because we don't see them in the glare of light, we do not know. They are themselves working. What can be done is wherever there is a network of people working, if you could mention them, that is one kind of sharing. But that can never be the complete thing, because that is really not the job of literature, though Mahashweta Devi did a lot of work because she combined this with activism. But I would say it is very important for writers to go beyond their own limited existence and go out and meet people. This is what Rabindranath Tagore had said. But you have to go beyond yourself. Apon hote bahir hoye samne dada. If you remain within yourself, then what you see is very, very limited. If as a civil servant, I see people in my neighborhood, they are probably bridge playing, whiskey drinking, I am not demeaning either, group of elites who are happy with their life every day. But you have to challenge yourself somewhere and you have to break your own barriers. But you remember that a writer is not alone. There are hundreds of people working in a similar situation, and together probably you are weaving a collage or a tapestry which will be getting shaped someday. But what shape it will take, it is not known. But please understand my saying this, that those so-called silent communities, they don't depend upon your and my mercy or will to survive. They have their own struggles and they have their own, way of coping with life. So this is something I have learned through my experiences.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On that note,
Wonderful.
we're going to say goodbye and thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you,
Thank you
Arunava.
everyone for coming.
Bye.